And we're live again. I think this is episode 5. Welcome to James's OneFinePlay's Ask Me Anything. That isn't going to be an Ask Me Anything for much longer. On today's show, we have Sam from Sam Talks Technology, a lockdown friend of mine. We've never met in person, but we've chatted lots. He's got lots of experience in the audio and podcasting space. I've got lots of questions for him, and I know he has for me too. Let's get straight on with the show. Connor, how are you doing this morning? You okay? Yeah, let's see how you're doing. You okay? What's new in your world?
Not too much, James. I've got a couple of emails actually back from prospective guests.
Great.
Happy to hear this
morning. We've got some exciting plans for the show. There's a new title in the mix. Actually came from Sam this morning.
Oh yeah.
Without revealing it, are you a fan?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, it was very, very quick with it. So it's very.
Actually, let's share the name. The name that's been muted is Rookie to Bishop. Very clever name. Never heard that before. I like it. We need to ponder it. See how we can make it work.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, we might as well crack on with this morning's show. Let's get Sam in. I'll leave you to work that magic. Good morning, Sam.
Hello, chaps. How are you?
Good, thank you. Connor, let's stick you back in the behind the scenes. Get working on those banners. Bit of live production happens on the show, Sam. It's pretty good. I've got do you ever drink instant coffee?
No. Gave up coffee years ago.
So I don't count instant coffees in my coffee for the day because it doesn't really have the same effect. So having an instant, because then it's like an extra one. So yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense, does it? Welcome. Thanks for joining me. As I was saying before the intro, we have never actually met in person. We've only ever met online. But I feel like I know you really well.
Yeah, no, we've had some great conversations. We've got a mutual friend in Andy Evans. So yeah, Andy pinged me and said, "You've got to know James," and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, Andy. He's a great guy. Knows so much about the ad tech world. So your background is radio. Is that fair to say? And now you have an extremely successful podcast.
Yeah, I mean, my current background is radio. I mean, I do radio and podcasting. My actual background, 20-odd plus years, is in technology. So Microsoft, Netscape, Gateway, and then several startups. Yeah.
Gateway. That makes me feel young or old, depending on which way you look at it. The fact that you work, I can just about remember it, makes me feel old. The fact you worked there makes me feel old.
Thanks. Now you're making me feel old.
Here anytime for that kind of thing. So your podcast,
yes,
Sam Talks Technology. Are you kind of had on the show? I think that episode is coming out sometime soon. But the premise of the show is, well, you can explain it.
Well, so Sam Talks Technology is really me finding really interesting entrepreneurs across the technology spectrum and interviewing them. And the format of the show is very simple. It's present, past, future. So tell me what you're up to today. Tell me what you did before you got into what you're doing, and then give you a platform to talk about what you're going to do next. And I find that format gives a little bit of structure to a podcast. That's all the structure I need. And then the next part of it is you can then go and interview that person. Sometimes the present is the big part. The middle part can be small, and vice versa. It just depends on the entrepreneur. Great.
I love the fact that you've got an interview show, but you've got a really clear structure for it so people know what to listen to. And it essentially, like we were talking about on the show maybe yesterday or late last week, was the fact that people really listeners like something where they become and feel familiar. A bit like your radio show probably, because you still do radio, right?
Yeah, I have taken a hiatus over COVID, but it's coming back next week. Yeah. So I do a radio show which is syndicated to 42 radio stations around the UK now. And that's a 1 hour show, which is great. And live is different to podcasting. You know that, James. You know, with live, there isn't a, oops, sorry, can we go back? Let's do that again. Stop, cut, edit. There's none of that. It's a bit like what we're doing now. It's totally live.
So how do you find the parallels between radio and podcasting? Have you taken best practice from radio and moved it across? Or,
yes,
you know, like which bits work and which bits don't, and what do you prefer, and what can you take from it?
So the only difference between podcasting and radio is live. I mean, that is it. Okay. So at the end of the day, with radio, you've got to sell forward, because somebody may have just chosen to listen to you by mistake. You know, oh, I'm suddenly in the middle of my, last program and I've drifted on to the next program. But if you've got an audience who wants to come to you, sometimes with radio, you have to sell forward. So in the next 20 minutes, we're going to be talking about Z. Then we're going to be talking about Y. And then we're going to talk about X. And then whatever. With podcasting, you can put chapterization in, you can put more structure in. So you can give the listener on a podcast round it, the metadata saying, jump to section Y if you want to listen to this bit we're talking about. But with radio, you don't have that opportunity. So you have to keep selling forward.
Are there any golden rules of radio that you use in your podcast that you think has made it successful? Because you have, we haven't talked a lot about your podcast yet, but you have a very successful podcast for, for the number of episodes that you've made and the level of, what should we say, fame that you have. Obviously, there are, you
for
have
me, I'd say
on the radio and the skill, but you're not, a celebrity per se. Not that I have anyway. So you're getting great listens in a really targeted community. And I wonder how much of that success has come from applying some golden rules that you learned. And I wonder what they might be.
One of the golden rules, I think, is it's so personal. It's the most intimate you can be with an individual, be it radio or podcasting, because you're in their ear. Most people are walking around with headphones. How many other people do you know get into your head personally? If you're lucky, your girlfriend might whisper in your ear at night.
I was about to say, well, my girlfriend and, I suppose, my ex-girlfriend, the things that, I did wrong that I should probably do right now. But apart from that, no, you're right.
So it's that intimacy, and you can't talk about we and you lot and all of you. It never works. Never talk about the general, talk about the personal. So I always try and use you, or how are you doing? What are you up to? Or relate it to a single person. Because if you can relate to an individual listening to you as you're talking, and in some ways the interview style is that it's me and you talking, but someone is being earwigging on my conversation with you. And it's that threesome intimacy that you get with podcasting or radio. And if you go to, I'm talking to 10,000 people or 5,000 people, and you talk generally, all of those people realize you're not talking to them, and then they'll switch off.
So here's an interesting question for you, even though this show is you asking me questions, but it's something that came up yesterday again, was I always recommend, it actually happened, we were at a recording studio in Northwest London, recording with, for a show we're making, and there's a tendency, I think, for especially new hosts, they don't talk to anybody in particular. So they don't talk to the listener. They don't talk to the listener in the thousands. They don't talk to one specific listener, but they don't really talk to the guest either. They're just talking into nothingness. And one of my pieces of advice is always talk to your listener. Like, make this show for your listener. Include them as a human in your narrative. And I think that you just spoke to that. So is that something that you do? And how do you integrate it into a conversation with a guest?
I think with me, the way I like to do it is I focus on the guest, right? You've got to intensely listen. You've got to intensely understand what they're saying. I've seen too many presenters drift off in the middle of an interview. They're focusing on what they're going to say next or doing whatever. If you don't listen to what your guest is actually saying, you'll miss the nuances of what they're trying to deliver, because most guests have never done podcasting. Most guests have never done radio. And so they're quite nervous. They're a little bit unsure about what to say sometimes. and you've got to bring out the conversation. So you're the person who's got to intently listen to what they're trying to say and guide them. Now, in the preamble before the show, I spend a lot of time saying to people, what is the core message you want me to get across for you? Because at the end of the day, most of the people who I interview are launching a new product, delivering some new service, getting something out there. And that's the core thing they want to get to. Yeah, and my job is to help them promote them. But the second part is, come on, let's have a little bit of under the, hood. Let's see who you really are and find out more about you.
Definitely. And I think I really like that advice, and something that I think you are better positioned to talk on probably than I am as someone of experience, but really valuable for anyone consuming this show, because it's something that I think comes more naturally the more you do it. But at first, it's a bit of an odd thing, isn't it? Trying to include this person in your conversation that you don't really have a tangible face to put to it. So what I think is really interesting is we got to talking through Andy, and I guess I was amazed at how far you had, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but I was amazed at how far you had come in your podcast, because you've got a listenership into the, way into the thousands, a regular show that's well known, that's revenue generating, but you had questions for me I just sort of said I'd help you out, right? I think that's how we came to talking, was just this, but in private, basically, just ask me whatever you want. So I guess I'm keen to hear what I helped you with. What have you learned from me so far? What value have I added to your experience? Because you have moved, I would say you've moved the needle quite a long way since I've known you in 4 months.
Thank you.
I'm interested to hear.
Well, James, the first thing that, I came to you was because Andy told me that, you're a professional podcasting editor and producer. And I thought, okay, well, I'm a rank amateur in this world. I'm still learning. And I always go out to people I think who can teach me or help me or give me some more info. So we started just chatting. I had no preconception of what was going to occur. And one of the things you did give me, one of the major takeaways, was stop being so precious about the channel that you put your content through. And, I was going, I've got it on here and I only do this and I only do that. And it was like, no, don't be so precious about it, or just get it out there, because you don't know where the audience is coming from. And so, I've now got Sam Talks Technology uncut on YouTube because of you. I take the Zoom videos that we do and I don't edit those, and I put them uncut. The ones I do edit, and we can come back and talk about editing in a second, but I do believe, the podcast needs to be heavily edited when you're actually going to deliver that as your main channel. But I took the content and I've started to look at different platforms quite happily. So, I'm on Instagram now, YouTube, which I wasn't on before we spoke. Yes, I do.
Can you see the value in them yet? Or is it, it's a slow burn.
It's too early.
It's too early.
But what it is,
you don't sell when you're now talking to sponsors, because I think as well, we spent quite a lot of time talking about sponsorship. I might be wrong here, but I don't want to blow my own trumpet as well. But I think I explained to you like dynamic ad insertion, and
you did.
Yeah. I don't know how you got so far without that. And you just landed yourself 2 sponsors, I think, when we first spoke. I don't know if we can say who they were. I can't even remember exactly. I would just guess it.
No, very happy. So you were the one. I was at the point where the show wasn't making any money. I was just trying to grow an audience, trying to develop the content style, and
you had grown an audience. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, let's give some numbers to it. At the time when we were talking, I was probably at about 3,500-4,000 downloads per episode. I'm over 7,000 now per episode, and I'm trying to get to 10,000. That's my goal.
That's incredible. Like, huge congratulations. I know there are a lot of people who listen to this show who would be absolutely delighted with those numbers. That puts you in the what's the statistic? The median number of listens, if you lined up every podcast ever, there's 30 million-ish. although that statistic's questionable because that number has been 30 million for the last 2 years. But let's say there's 30 million. If you were to line them all up from in order of number of listens, the median, so in the middle, halfway up would be 124 listens. So over 124 listens an episode, you're in the top 50% of all podcast listens ever. And at 1,000, I think you're in the top 1%. So you're doing incredibly well.
Thank you.
And you'd managed to secure yourself 2 sponsors. I think, am I right thinking they were Amazon? I think it was Amazon and Microsoft.
Yes.
Is that right? Or it might not be true.
No, that's true. So Amazon so Amazon is sponsoring a podcast I'm launching called Sound Talks IoT, or Alexa in this case. And the guy who's introduced me to that is a guy called Nuri Bernard Hassan, who runs the Amazon Web Services PR team. And he's my ex-boss from Microsoft, actually, when I used to work there. So let's be clear. Sometimes you get these sponsorships more from who you know and not what you know, and it's a trust element. And so, again, Microsoft and Amazon came to me early because of trust. But the ones I've got recently, Descript and Simplecast, are more to do with the fact that they understand that I've got an audience, that I've got an opportunity for them who are podcasting platforms to reach out to that audience. And because they're American companies, they want to break into the UK, Europe, and beyond. So Descript's a great partner. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think there's a real key learning here, a real key takeaway, which is what you've done is amazing. But the key takeaway for me is, number one, you didn't complicate how to get a sponsor. You just asked.
Yep.
That was pretty much it. And that's made a massive difference. And number two, you went to like people that you know that you thought were relevant in the space that you're in. And amazingly, they just said, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we're doing sponsorship deals on a regular basis now, like every week with brands, because we're getting to a point where brands are starting to become more and more aware of podcasting. And it's actually really easy because they don't really know what they're doing. So they want to taste something. So if you want, we just got, these sound like huge numbers, but they're not really. Like, we just got £25,000 from a brand who's never sponsored a podcast before. But this is a $30 billion turnover company that we got the money from. So we're like a rounding error to them. And for them, we found the right person within the business, which in this case is a sustainability driven podcast. So it hasn't come out of marketing. It hasn't gone through loads of red tape. It's someone who's pleased that they can align themselves with a creator and has gone, yeah, absolutely, will support you. And the difference is that the only difference is that we asked. And I meet so many people who just forget to ask. There's too much, how do I? Just ask people. They want to support you, and you're testament to that, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. I believe that you've got to get, look, if you never ask, you never get. That's the old adage, right? As an entrepreneur, we used to blag free office space in central London to host events. We used to blag, people to come and sponsor drinks events, whatever. People are looking for the opportunity as well. Sometimes you think, oh, I need a sponsor. Who shall I ask? But sometimes the sponsor's going, I need to get out. I need to find a medium that I can get into. And I think what I was talking to...
Connor, you can't have that semicolon in the middle of that sentence, mate. You can't put that there. You can have a comma, but you can't have a semicolon. A semicolon connects two sentences of the same, two separate full sentences of the same theme or topic together. That's what it does. You can't just stick it in the middle of a sentence. Carry on, Sam.
So now I was just saying
I have a dad that's an English teacher, and so I'm a stickler for those kinds of things. You shouldn't really have the comma after sponsorship either, Connor. But I see them, and because I know my, parents like to support stuff. If we have a clip up here and it's got a grammar error, I'll just get a message going, who is this kid you've employed that doesn't know how to use semicolons? Because that's what parents are like. But we're all good. Connor, you all right? You're not crying? No? You're all right?
No, I'm good.
Good, you got it?
I'm just trying to compose the sentence, yeah.
Okay.
I know they're two independent sentences that are intermittently connected, but yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
anyway, back that English lesson for the day over. Let's go back to podcasting.
No, I was enjoying that English lesson. Thank you very much. I won't
Wow.
make the same rookie. I won't make the same mistake.
If you knew how many times in a day I bite my tongue, unreal. My girlfriend has an inability to work out the difference between when to use me and I. So she'll say,
no.
no. And every time I correct her, and she's like, "Are we going to do this for the rest of our lives?" Well, until you get it right. Yeah, drives me bonkers.
James, here you go. You can tell her when it's the wedding. Maybe you don't want to do this, but you say, "I do, not me do."
Exactly. Like, how come when you add another person in the sentence, you change it? Like, I went here, James and me went here. No, why have you changed the I to a me? She goes, "Oh yeah," and then the next day she does the same mistake again. Like, okay, we'll just keep going. Anyway, back off our soapbox of amazing fullness to reality.
So
Connor nearly smiled. Then I don't know if you can see Connor in your screen at the bottom, but it was no. Oh, I can see him in the green room back, and there's nearly a smile. He nearly laughed. It's rare. Anyway, carry on.
I think we were talking about sponsors.
Yeah, we were. So tell me about, you've got two big names in the podcasting space. You've got Descript and Simplecast partnering with you. So I'm sure people are fascinated to understand how that came to be. Maybe you could just talk us through the process, because I'm pretty sure you didn't contact either of those guys with the initial intent of partnership.
No, I mean, I think, again, a hat tip to you, James. So from our first conversation, I'm just giving the credit where it's due. So we were talking about editing and how much you spend on editing, and we were talking about maybe you editing my podcast. And as you know, I'm as tight as they come. So So I looked around, and Descript had just started to come onto the scene, and I thought, I'd like to go and learn how to do this, because being technical as well, I always like to know how to try and do it, even if I can't always do it. And so Descript changed my life in terms of podcasting. It removed the ums, the ahs, the likes. It allowed me to edit the transcript in real time. It's got a few new features that I'm about to launch onto my own platform. I'm on the beta now, so I can't talk about them. And it really will change the way that podcasting works. And it's just growing and growing. So I got to know Jay, who's the marketing director there. And I just said, look, let's just build a rapport. And that's part of it. You can't just go in day one and say, hey, you're an interesting company. Let's just, sponsor me. I needed to talk to him. He needed to understand who I was, what Sam Talks Technology was, what our platform was going to help them deliver. We got all of that together, which was great. We then did 2 podcasting festivals over COVID. We got some fairly good speakers. We had Cara Swisher, George the Poet, Dan Snow. And so that gave me a little bit more credibility, as well as all the people I interviewed. And then, I revealed the numbers. I showed him my analytics. You show me yours, I'll show you mine. And at that point, it was like, oh, okay, so you've done some great events, you've got some great interviews, and your numbers stack up. Yeah, okay, we'll do something with you. Let's test the water. So that's where we are. And I did the same with, thanks to you again. You introduced me to Simplecast, is, dynamic ad insertion. I think they call it MAE.
Don't they?
EA, MAE, MA. Yeah, I think it's MAE. They call it.
What's that stand for?
I need to look it up. Media ad.
Sounds like a great marketing plan. That does. Go on, carry on.
Yeah. Anyway, they've renamed DAI.
Hardly anyone knows what DAI stands for. So
exactly,
use a different acronym is not going to help you. Anyway, great plan. Yeah.
Well, part of it is, if no one knows what DAI is, let's own our own.
Maybe call it whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
So you told me about the fact they were bringing to market a dynamic ad insertion, because you said to me, how are you going to be doing ads? If you're going to get a sponsor, what way are you going to do it? And I said, well, Leo Laporte on Twitter, who I sort of, based the original style show on, he just talks it, hey, this program's brought to you today by Descript, blah, 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 the professional podcasting studio. Or, you get a pre-canned one. And you said, well, don't do that, because the problem is it dates it. You end up having a podcast that could be an evergreen, but then the ad will not be an evergreen part of it. And so you've now fixed this structure. And I was like, okay, well, let me find out. And I thought, well, I need to find out more about, dynamic ad insertion. And Spotify's about to release their version of it, and there's a few other platforms doing it. So it's getting interesting. But I didn't ever want to be doing a Casper bed mattress advert in the middle of a technology show. I just didn't want to do it. It's audience. Well, audience meet brand meet audience. It doesn't work for me personally. So the next thing for me was to find the platform, which I did. And again, I spoke to Brad Smith, the CEO. We had a good chat. And next thing you know, he's a partner and a sponsor.
Because you probably just asked him.
I did ask him, yes. And I've asked 2 more, which I'm about to reveal, but not here today.
So dynamic ad insertion, I'm just going to explain for anyone who doesn't understand what that means, what on earth we're talking about. So when you create a podcast, essentially you've got an audio file, and then, some people have ads inside their show. I think the best way to think of an ad is a bit like a billboard. So, like you might have seen in the street in the past, inside your show. And normally you can put one at the beginning. That's normally referred to as pre-roll. Mid-roll, those are ads that appear in the middle. And then sometimes you have post-roll ads as well. So imagine there's a billboard at the beginning and in the middle and at the end. Now, some shows, and there are lots of variables here, and lots of it is to do with its value, but you can just, what we would call in the industry, bake in your ad. So it's stuck there forever. So it's like you have super glued your ad to the billboard. And that's great, and it holds lots of value because it's in there forever. So some sponsors like that, and I think it's what lots of people assume. But one of the challenges is that it goes out of date quite quickly, and you've sold that ad space and you can't ever resell it. But luckily, the technology exists for you to be able to insert ads over and over again. So like a digital billboard, basically. So you can sell that space, that ad space, that billboard inside your podcast today for, say, 3 months, or you could sell someone over a period of time, over a number of impressions. So you could sell 5,000 impressions. So 5,000 times that ad appears at the beginning or in the middle or wherever you want. And different places in the podcast have different values, and they can run for different lengths, that kind of thing. So that ability to sell an advert over time, or a number of impressions, and then it to be not there anymore, that's called dynamic ad insertion or programmatic ad insertion. And so that, an easy example is if you listen to one of your favorite podcasts like Joe Rogan, for example, those are dynamically inserted ads. So whatever episode you listen to going backwards, you will always hear an ad that's relevant to you today. So you'll always hear codes and discounts and whatever that are up to the minute, even if you're listening to a show from 3 years ago. And then what happens is you have you build up back catalog. So it's like building real estate. So every time you add a new episode, you've got real estate, and then obviously the older it gets, the less it's worth, because the chances are people are listening to newer stuff. But if you got, I don't know, it's Sam, if you got Tim Cook on the show, in 3 years he'd probably still be quite a good episode, because of his status and what they're talking about. So people might go back and listen to that, and you can charge different amounts for different insertions, and that's what makes having a podcast really interesting. And as a podcast production company, most people are trying to have shared ownership of that ad space. That's one of our revenue models in our business, is to share the ownership with the creators of that ad space, so then we have ongoing revenue. So I have a question for you, Sam, and then I think you've got a couple of questions to ask me. This is going to sound like a sell, but it's not really. It's like the ultimate question that I'm still intrigued by. You getting loads of listens, and your listenership is growing. By the hands, it's growing 50% this year so far in listenership, which is
Through COVID, it's been brilliant. Yeah,
through COVID, you've had some excellent guests on, like myself. I'm joking. You've actually had some credible people on the show, and you're making ad revenue, so you're making money, so it's profit making. And now I appreciate you've got to pay for your time, but you also, by your own admission, you don't like spending money, which I understand. It's not that you don't like it, that's unfair. It's like, there's an element of hustle, which I totally respect. But I also know that you edit your podcast yourself and you don't have a producer. So you don't have anyone objectively working on your show. Now, if you had no ad revenue, I could understand why. But I don't understand, or I don't see. I'd love you to talk me through the vision for the future. What impact do you think not having a producer and editor has? How long can it be sustainable for? And what is your plan for evolution?
Okay, great question. So the answer is I'm going
to sign up.
I'll be there in 5 minutes, James. Just send me the form. The challenge for me is that I'm very specific about how I like my podcast to be edited, and that's the problem. That's my initial. The way that I edit it within Descript means that I know that it gets the way and the style that I want. Now that may be me being overly precious about my podcast, which, you know, so long as I want to do a good and quality job, that's what I'm doing. So outsourcing it for me feels a little bit difficult. It's a bit like, you know, I've got a gardener who mows my lawn. He never mows it as good as I would do it, but I've now outsourced it because I need the time. And the problem I've got right now is I'm running out of time.
You're behind time. I reckon I could get you another 50% growth just by managing it better objectively from a business perspective. I know, because we've spoken before, that you've got like 10 to 15 episodes in the bag and loads of ideas, but planning, you know, executing, post-production, releasing, strategic thinking, and all the rest of it. It's costing. There's an opportunity cost here. I will say, just to go back to your point though, I totally respect the idea that you like to edit your own episodes. The best YouTubers in the game edit their own episodes. Casey Neistat, who's, you know, a very well-known YouTuber, he is deemed of changing the face of daily vlogging for YouTubers. He edited 500 daily vlogs. So he edited a 10-minute video every day for 500 days in a row, and he did every single one himself. And he has a style, which means that as soon as someone else edited it, you would just know. PewDiePie, who's on 105 million subscribers, edits his own videos. Not all of them. He has Sive edit some of them, but he edits some of his own videos. And there are endless examples of this. But eventually you have to get in support as you grow. And so you have to find a way to partner. Otherwise, it's going to become more prohibitive.
Look, to answer your question, you're completely right.
And also what happens if an editor who does it all day, every day, actually has ideas that would make it better to the listener?
Yeah, and look, I'm not the arbiter of taste, and I'm not the arbiter of everything that's great.
Wow.
I'm happily put myself as a rank amateur, learning as I go along, trying to develop the art of podcasting by playing at the bleeding edge of it more often than not, but trying to understand. So, for example, you know, we talked about another product that I'm using at the moment called Lately, which is a brilliant product. And look, it's got its drawbacks. It's not perfect, but it's another step maybe in terms of me being able to distribute my podcast and chunk it up into smaller bite-sized tweetable elements and ship it out. Now, eventually I can't do that. That I know, that whole distribution. So when I look at podcasting, I have 5 steps, right? Production, pre-production, planning, and production. Then there's the editing. Then there's the promotion. Then there's the distribution, and then there's the profitization, right? Those are the elements for me of podcasting. Now, I can do some of those elements well. I can't do all of those elements well. And each element takes longer. So to give you an answer, I would spend a 40-minute podcast that we might be having like now. For me to clean it up and make it the way I want it, it may take me an hour, 2 hours again to do that, just because I want to get it right. And then it'll take me another hour maybe to distribute it correctly in the formats that I want.
And what are you doing in that hour? Because I think one of your questions to me, just because you mentioned it before the show, was how long should it take to edit a podcast episode?
Absolutely. How long would you take to edit?
Me personally, about 3 days. But one of the crack team here at OneFinePlay we factor about 3 times the duration of the podcast. Partly depends on whether you've got video or audio only, and it obviously depends on the complexity of the edit. But for an interview show, you'd be looking at about for a straightforward interview show, if it's not the first episode and you've got in a rhythm, you're looking at about 3 to 1. But it depends how obsessive you are over getting rid of every every R. Most of our time goes into editorial, and our shows are, you've got an intro to add, an outro, you might have signposting in the middle, you've got ads, you might have music bed, sound bed. There's the mastering of all of the episodes as well. So there's the cleaning up to tweak the sound so it sounds good. There's the maybe reordering the conversation. So it depends. There's quite a lot to potentially go into it.
Yeah, and
the cat has just got in. Can you hear that?
I can, yes.
Brilliant. Anyway, we'll see if he settles down.
I think, Descript removes all the ums, the ahs, the likes, really quickly. So that part's easy. It's not that, but when you're going through your podcast and listening back to what the interviewer said, sometimes, and not always, there's a whole bunch of what I call waffle in the conversation, right? And if you're going back to what I said at the beginning, you are intimate with your listener, that they've given you permission to be in their ear, in their head. And the last thing you can do is waste their time. And so I try and make sure that it's tight. So sometimes I might ask, just to settle the interviewee down, hey, James, where are you? Where are you in the world? Let's talk about, I'm in London, I'm here, I'm in my flat, I'm in this. Right, great. For you and I, when we're doing that live, I don't have an issue.
You and me.
But when I cut it down, I don't want that in there. I'm trying to bring it down. I might bring half of that bit in. Hey, James, where are you? And you might say, I'm in London. Great. That's it. I don't need to know your life story from the last 3 weeks, nor does my listener.
The way that we describe that, Sam, is that you're best off sharing the highlight reel of the conversation you had, not the conversation. It's too dull. And that's one of these challenges. One of the challenges of these lives is, I love the format because there's no edit. It's working really well for us. But you've got to be quite punchy. You've got to keep it moving. You've got to have... Doesn't suit everyone. I have a personality type that is fairly disruptive by nature, so I just talk over the top of you to keep things moving if I think it's dragging on. But because which suits me, it definitely wouldn't suit everybody. But otherwise, what happens is, as you say, you end up with things that would need to have come out in post-production. So anyway, back to my original question. What is the plan?
Yes.
What is the plan?
The plan is I do need to go outside of my bubble and get somebody to come and help me, because you're right. I'm 20 podcasts in the can and down, and I've got 6 to do this week. Interviews. I'm doing one in 5 minutes time, so I will be leaving you. But and I'm planning on getting a podcast out a day, and I'm also planning on doing a daily, morning podcast for your breakfast over Alexa, which is already ready to go. So I've got more and more stuff I want to do. I've got more sponsors who want me to run vertical podcasts. So we talked at the beginning about me running an Alexa podcast, me running a Microsoft podcast, running other ones. Eventually I'm going to try and get other podcasters to come and work with me as well. So try and build up more of a network of podcasters. So
you need a team, Sam. Imagine if you knew someone who ran like a producer and editing service that you could answer on like Upwork or something, and then I'll have to cry.
Then you'll unfriend me.
One question or one thing I'd like to talk about.
Yeah,
because I'm conscious of the time. This has been a great chat, and one of the challenges of these is we don't get much time. You'll have to come back on. Daily releasing. I'm not a fan of that idea.
Okay.
I know someone who's coming on the show next week, actually, who released their podcast every 3 days. They did a season and they thought that momentum would be great. It's too much from a listener perspective. Like, if I'm a fan of your show and I want to listen to all the episodes and you release 10, I don't have the bandwidth to listen to your episode every day. And what's going to happen is it's going to constantly come into the top of my feed and I'm going to get frustrated. I can't listen to it. and probably like unsubscribe or just start listening to other stuff because I can't keep up. And then there's just going to be this huge backlog. Like, and so unless you're happy, you can release every day, but you have to be realistic that your listenership is going to fall.
I don't know if I agree.
Okay, well,
I think you're right.
When it happens,
I think you're right on one bit. Okay, I think you're right on one bit. Not everybody will listen to that podcast every day. Okay, the reason why I'm looking at maybe, and it's a big maybe, because again, I still have to achieve it. You know, saying it and doing it are two things, right? Yeah. But the reality is that I know that I want to do a daily news podcast, right? That's a 5-minute podcast of highlights. That's just, you know, throw away in the morning. Hopefully that becomes your morning thing. Hey, what's Sam got to say? Here's the 5 highlights, a little bit of
news of technology.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. The other side of it is timeliness on podcasts. So the guy I'm about to interview, he's got a massive story that's breaking next week. We're doing the podcast today. That will be released on the day that news story goes out. Now, what I want to do, I used to run TechCrunch Europe. I set it up. And the whole idea is that you want to get timely. Sorry. So you want to get timely. And getting timely news is what people want. You know, me talking about a podcast of news that's 6 months ago, you know, doesn't work for most people. That it's gone, right? So I need to try and find. So there's so much great news and so many great startup stories out there, and so much technology that's happening still. And what I'm trying to see is, can I do them as shorter podcasts, half an hour maybe, but do them more often? Will that be a better format? Or do I do longer ones and just do less of them? I don't know the answer.
Let's jump on a call and brainstorm the answers to this. Right now, you've got to go on a call. Bagheera, I'm coming. I'll be there in a second. He's meowing. He needs some food. Guys, it's been a great show. Connor, I'm going to wrap it up right now. This is going to be on YouTube to watch, on Facebook to watch. You can find Sam at samtalks.technology. Great show. Follow us at OneFinePlay on all the social platforms. Smash that subscribe button. We'll be back tomorrow for another show. Send us your questions live at OneFinePlay. Sam, thank you very much. Until next time.
Peace. James.